Hello, it is day 4, and today we are going to jump into resiliency. It's something that I touched on day 1, and it is absolutely foundational to success. All of these power skills you probably have heard me say so far are foundational to success, and resiliency is definitely one of those things. So, what I want to dive into today is what is resiliency? How do you operate in a world where things are constantly changing? How does resiliency help you, hurt you, etc.? You ready? Are you ready? Okay. So on Monday, I alluded to the fact that on day 1, I alluded to the fact that yes, we know about IQ. On day 2, we talked about EQ and the importance of EQ and how foundational that is. And on day 1, I mentioned that AQ is being proven, has been proven in studies already, and is being proven ongoing to be more important than EQ. Now, is that 100% accurate? Don't know. They've really just started studying it. What I do know is that resiliency and adaptability have been key to my success and the people that I know who have gone on to be tremendous leaders, who are my mentors and coaches, and other people that have succeeded in this world over time. Resiliency and adaptability are key. Ready to dive in? All right. So, what is resiliency? What is it? And what is the difference between resiliency and adaptability? I kind of see them going hand in hand. And if you look up the definition of resiliency or you look up the definition of adaptability, resiliency is, according to the definitions, the ability to bounce back from a situation. And adaptability is the ability to shift in a difficult situation and make something good from it. I kind of see the two working hand in hand. And when the AQ score was talked about in the studies that I've read around it, they use both adaptability and resiliency. So I'm going to kind of talk to both aspects of this today as we dig into resiliency. Now, there's a lot to cover. This is a very in-depth topic when I am working on VIP days with clients or when we are doing ongoing coaching situations. And the workshop that I do on this in corporations and organizations is a full day workshop, and it is a hands-on workshop. So there's a lot of information. We're going to do a surface level on most of it today. I'm going to send out some follow-up information on it. So if you are not on the email list, you're going to want to be on the email list. Let me share that link with you right here. It's in the chat, and I am going to show it on the screen right now. All right. So you should be seeing the link. If you haven't yet signed up and you want to get the follow-up information, make sure you get signed up. Let's dive in. All right. So change, growth, uncertainty, resiliency, right? When there is change and growth and uncertainty going on, it is resiliency and adaptability that get you through those things and get you out on the other side. Now, a key point in being able to be resilient and be adaptable is to have a growth mindset. I mentioned Carol Dweck's book the other day around mindset, and those are the terms that she uses: growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Growth looks at abundance. Fixed mindset looks at scarcity. Okay. So fixed mindset, this is the way it is. It's not going to change. It is what it is. Nothing's going to fix it. Okay. Abundance mindset, growth mindset is one where there is always opportunity. There's always room for expansion, etc. And I've been talking every single day about the power of neuroplasticity, the power of our minds to be able to shift and take on new aspects, new thoughts that counteract beliefs that we've had, the meaning that we give to things, the thoughts that we have that drive 80 to 90 plus percent of every decision, action, and result that we get. So, this whole thing around resiliency and adaptability requires a growth mindset. That, in and of itself, is a whole course and a whole series of coaching. So, I just want to put that piece out there that if you find yourself in more of a scarcity mindset, if you're operating from a place of fear, then that is absolutely a fixed mindset. Okay. Going to get into some of that. So, where does resiliency and adaptability come into play? The US Army War College used an acronym VUCA right after the Cold War. And it's something that's been adopted in organizational change management, in corporations, in all sorts of places. So, what does VUCA stand for? V is volatility. U is uncertainty, C is complexity, and A is ambiguous. So the volatility, nature, speed, volume, etc., right? The uncertainty, how many of you like surprises? Uncertainty includes surprises. The deal is you like surprises that you don't like the surprises that you don't like, right? People are like, oh, I love surprises. No, you don't. You don't love all surprises. You love the surprises that you want, right? So uncertainty includes those surprises. It includes the unknown. The complexity, we live in a world of complexity, obviously, right? So ambiguous, lack of clarity, right? And unknown. So VUCA is the world that we live in, and it gets more and more VUCA every day. If you look at things that are happening with artificial intelligence, which is what, we started the week with talking about how, people are freaking out around artificial intelligence taking jobs. And, they're saying by the year 2030 that 326 million jobs will be replaced with artificial intelligence. That's a lot of VUCA, right? That's a lot of change. That's a lot of need to be resilient. So, where do we go from there? All right. In order to be resilient in this ever changing world, there are some things that you get to do. And I say get to do versus need to do versus should do versus have to do. And I say it like that for a reason. Our brains, that subconscious brain that I keep referring to, receives it differently when you say, I get to do something versus I should, or I have to, or I need to. Okay. Think about it. I get to do these things. All right. I want to look at my notes here real quick. All right. So, in the volatility aspect, what is really needed, what you get to do in the volatility piece is have vision and take action. Have a vision and an action plan. Okay. With uncertainty, you get to have an understanding, you get to get clarity, you get to make a better perspective of what's going on. Notice what meaning you're giving to things, what stories are you giving to it, and then decide, is that really the perspective that I want to have on this? With the C, you have to get clarity, okay? Have to get to have clarity. You get to develop clarity around what is happening to the best of your ability. Now, when things are rapidly changing, it is not possible to have exact clarity all the time. Although you can have clarity on your vision and you can have clarity on your goals. Without the clarity on your vision and your goals and your values, then you can't portray that to your clients. You can't portray that to your family. You can't portray that to your employees. You can't portray that to your prospects. So that vision, that clarity of vision and goals is pertinent. All right. So with ambiguity, it is agility in decision making. Okay. agility in decision making, and innovation. So there are different things to take, different steps to take in each of the areas of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Clarity, vision, action, perspective, all of these things get combined in order to work in a world where resiliency and adaptability are going to be your saving grace to thriving. Okay. All right. Fears and behaviors. So often, yes, you get to do a lot of things, Lorraine. So, fears and behaviors. Like I said at the very beginning, if fear is what is driving you, then you're operating from a place of scarcity and uncertainty. Okay. Fear is not something that is a positive for you. Now, can you recognize a fear and then use that fear to gain clarity and gain perspective and gain direction? Absolutely. Notice the difference between the two. Operating from a place of fear versus using that fear to get clarity and take your next steps. Two very different things. So when you are thinking about this resiliency piece, whether it's just you or your team, your business, your family, whatever that looks like, take the time to recognize, are you operating from fear, or are you using fear to bring about clarity, perspective, direction, etc.? Okay. Two very different things. And so often we let fear drive decisions that we make. And remember, those decisions that we make, the actions that we take, and the results that we get, 80 to 90+% of them are driven by our subconscious thoughts. And our subconscious thoughts, our brains and our subconscious thoughts are designed for survival, not thriving. So it is absolutely necessary to recognize and bring to the conscious level those fears, okay? Because they're going to drive you. If you're not taking control of those fears, they're going to drive you. And resiliency and adaptability won't be what's happening. You'll be operating from back on your heels. If you've ever been in fighting or boxing or martial arts, if you're coming from your heels, not a good place. Same thing in sports. I've always been a very active athlete, and you want to make sure that you're leaning in, right? And one of my mentors talks about being a business athlete. Absolutely. It's leaning in. It's not operating from a place of fear. It's recognizing your fears and then leaning in. That's where resiliency comes in. That's where adaptability comes in. Okay. All right. So when those fears come up, they trigger emotional response, because it's based on the stories and beliefs that we have around that fear or that situation. So if you are operating from those triggers, what kind of result are you going to get? Probably not the one you're looking for. Okay. All right. So there's different types of change that happen where resiliency and adaptability are super important. And hold on, I want to make sure I put this on Do Not Disturb. I thought that I had already done that, but it just popped up. Let me do this. There we go. Do Not Disturb on. All right. So there are three different levels of, three different types of change that where resiliency and adaptability are super important. The first is from a developmental standpoint. Those changes are pretty subtle. Okay. They're just little things, little changes. But then there's transitional changes. Those are moderate. The impact of a transitional change is going to be moderate. The impact of a transformational change is huge. It is radical. And that's what so many of us are operating within every day these days, is transformational change. Now, is that transformation something that we're going after, or is it being pushed upon us? Which is it? Oftentimes it's things that are being pushed upon us. And we get to decide, are we going to transform with it, because of it, or in spite of it? What does that transformation look like? Is it going to be a transformation that we choose or one that is chosen for us? It's going to be one or the other. Transformation comes about regardless. Is it going to be the transformation you choose, or is it the transformation someone chooses for you? And remember, the transformational changes are radical changes. And you do get to decide. You do have the opportunity to make a choice around it. Okay? So there's culture changes, there is direction, there's goals, there's communication, there's decision making, and ability to lead. All of these are parts of resiliency. So when you're looking at the culture, are you developing a culture of resiliency? Are you giving direction and goals to yourself, to your family, to your team, to your business, to your clients? Is it coming from a place of resiliency? Right? When you are communicating, and listen, when change is going on, it is of utmost importance to communicate what those changes are. Again, whether they are being driven on you or you are pushing those changes out, communication is huge. It is an absolute change maker in any environment that you're in. Okay. All right. And then decision making. Resiliency and decision making. How quick do you make decisions? Does it take you forever to make a decision? Do you have to have all of the information before you make a decision? Or can you make a decision and then continue to pivot, continue to adjust, continue to adapt? Because the faster you can make decisions, the faster you can get into action. And when you are operating from a place of abundance, learning decision-making skills that come from that place of abundance, differentiator in what the end results will be. Okay. Because once you realize that you can make these decisions from a place of abundance, you realize that you're not stuck with whatever decision you've made. You can continue to make small tweaks, big tweaks, etc. Right? And then with your ability to lead, are you resilient in your ability to lead? Because the people that you may be leading, and even yourself, as you lead yourself, personal leadership is one of the things that I will stand on that mountain for forever and preach the importance of personal leadership. Because if you can't lead yourself, you surely cannot lead anyone else. Okay? So having the ability to lead yourself, having the ability to lead others requires you to be resilient and adaptable to the transformation that is happening within you and around you, and your ability to make decisions based on all of that. Okay? All right. So increasing radical change is also going to increase the fear and resistance of said change. Okay? So the more radical the change is, the more fear it's going to bring up, the more resistance it's going to bring up. And that gives you an opportunity to lean in at that point and say, okay, remember that part about operating from fear versus operating from learning what the fear is so that I can make a better decision? Abundance versus scarcity. So take the time to really lean in, particularly when it feels like you do not have the time, because those radical changes are coming faster and faster and faster and faster every single day, every year, every week, every month, every situation, those radical changes are happening quicker and quicker, which means that your decision-making skills, your ability to assess a situation, your ability to be resilient and adaptable gets to be quicker as well. All right, next up, I want to talk about the cycle that happens. How many of you have ever heard of the Kubler-Ross grief cycle? It's typically spoken about in 5 stages that starts with disbelief and ends with adapting, right? And I want to read a quote to you before I dive into the actual cycle itself. So give me a second. I want to, if you know me, you know I love quotes. And I love this one by T.S. Eliot. And listen closely because it gets a little convoluted. What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make our end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. The end is where we start from. So what is it that you want to be achieving? What is it? What is that goal that you're wanting to get to? What is that vision that you want to implement? What does that look like for you? That's the end game. So often we get caught up in the how do I get there? No, don't get caught up in the how, because the how, there's 1,000 hows. What's the vision? What's the goal? And then be open to the abundance of ways that can get there. Now, I'm not saying don't put a plan in place. Yes, put a plan in place and be open to the opportunities that come before you. But back to the Kubler-Ross cycle. So this, when you look at the whole cycle of radical change, okay, people will go through the same Kubler-Ross cycle that one goes through when experiencing grief, okay? And when you're going through grief, there's actually three different types of grief. And so, like, speaking of the loss of a loved one, for instance, there is the grief of the loss itself. There is the grief of what you wanted and did not get. And there is the grief of what you got and did not want. Those same 3 happen in any kind of change. So I want to go over what the cycles are that one can go through, either as an individual, as a company, as a team, as a family. All right. So there's a lot of stages, and you can find yourself in any of these stages. The typical cycle looks like this: shock and disbelief, fear and blame, depression, self-doubt. Then you start experimenting and accepting, right? And then decision making. Okay, I'm starting to accept this. I get to make some decisions around it. And then adapting and integrating. Now, understand that with grief, and we're using the term grief, but most people don't realize they're in grief when they're going through these change processes. But it's exactly the same thing. Okay, it's the exact same thing. So you can end up in any part of that cycle, and it's up and down, and you can end up anywhere at any given time based on what is happening from a change standpoint. That's why this whole resiliency and adaptability piece is so important. Because if you are in a place of shock and disbelief, what's the story you're saying? What is the meaning you're giving it? Okay. Be able to step back and look at it like that. What is the meaning I'm giving this? Do I want to accept that meaning? Is that meaning true? Because your subconscious brain, when you're operating in a place of grief and fear and those type of emotions, it's going to play games with you. It's going to keep you in a place of survival and not thriving. And we want to operate from a place of thriving, right? So when you are in a place like that, communication and rapport building strategies are so important. You get to communicate, again, whether it is in your family or whether it's with your team or with your clients, communication skills are critical. We're going to talk about those on another day during this series, but know that we get to practice our communication skills regularly in every single situation that we find ourselves in. It's communicating with ourselves and it's communicating with others around us. And that rapport building. How do we connect with people? Connection skills are so important. And this was something that I learned very late in life. Very late compared to how old I am now. It's probably in my 40s when I really realized just how important connection is. I know I was in my 40s because I realized it when I was going through my divorce. And I realized how much my childhood had impacted my adulthood. I went through that radical transformation when I was going through my divorce, and I was thinking about, okay, what do I get to shift in order to be the kind of person that doesn't have this happen again, right? And as I started digging into that, I started realizing, wow, I've always been resilient. I've always been adaptable. I haven't always communicated about it. I haven't always connected around it. Okay. And it was when I learned to do that that I was able to take on a whole new level. And that's what I want for you. That's what I work with my clients on, whether it is coming in and doing a workshop in their place of business for teams, sales teams, operational teams, whatever that looks like, whether it is doing a VIP day for clients where we dig into what are the goals, what are the things that we want to do, that we've been avoiding doing, and what we get to do in order to achieve our vision. We go deep into getting that clarity, okay? Or whether it is coaching over a whole year, right? This whole resiliency and adaptability piece, this whole how our brains impact our resiliency and adaptability is huge. And guess what? The odds of you being able to call yourself out on it, pretty slim. I can't call myself out on it. I walk the talk. I hire coaches who can help call me out because I can't do it for myself. And neither can you. Yes, there are instances when you can. The vast majority of the time, the things that are really impacting you, that are really keeping you where you are, I often hear the phrase, I'm stuck, from my clients. You're not stuck. You just can't see your own blind spots. Find someone who can get you to see your blind spots, who can see your blind spots for you. If you're interested in learning more about it, I would love to hop on just a consultation call. It's not a sales call. It is a consultation call, and find out, is this something that would be great for you? Whether it's with me or anybody else. It's not the point. The point is, what are your blind spots? Let's start uncovering them. And if this is something that you're interested in, you can comment below or you can send me a DM and we will be happy to send you a calendar link so that we can schedule time and chat for like 30 minutes and come up with a plan for you to find someone to help you discover your blind spots, right? Now, I want to jump back in because there's still a lot more to cover on resiliency and adaptability. You ready? All right. So building that resiliency muscle. Let's see. There's a whole list of things that one can do. And I made a little mini list here so I wouldn't forget anything. But there's a list of, gosh, I don't know. It's probably limitless. But a few of the things that you can do to build resiliency include mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is not the same thing as mastering your mind, okay? Mindset is not the same thing as mastering your mind. So when you are thinking about mindfulness, mindfulness is just becoming aware, right? It's becoming aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And gosh, you guys, so often we just let that stuff drive us, and it doesn't have to. Sure, if you're in a great mindset, then let that drive you. If it's the mindset that you get to be in order to achieve whatever it is that you're wanting to go after. Okay. But if you are in a negative mindset, if you're in a fixed mindset, know that you will not get to the place you ultimately want to go. In fact, you may not even realize until it's too late that you have your ladder leaning against the wrong wall. Okay? Because when we are in a fixed mindset, we tend to operate from, a place of what do others think? How is this going to look if I do this? What if I don't do this? What will people think? Right? So being mindful of what are the stories you're saying, what is the meaning you're giving to situations? How are you feeling about things? Mindfulness, acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean laying down and taking whatever someone gives to you. It means accepting this is the situation. And now I have the ability to make a choice. Now I have the ability to go after additional information and decide what my next steps are. Okay. So acceptance is not laying down and just taking whatever. It is accepting that this is today. This is where I am. I have 100% responsibility for how I respond. Okay? That's acceptance. Optimism. Optimism never hurt anybody. Ridiculous optimism may have, but optimism itself is a great thing. And when you feel yourself getting down, what can you do to boost your level of optimism? It's so important. The people who truly are resilient, they know that there's always another level they can go to. There's another place they can get to. There's someone else they can talk to. Okay? So optimism. We've got mindfulness, acceptance, optimism, a sense of humor. Holy cow. You guys, a sense of humor is so freaking important. I have been called an inappropriate laugher. Okay? I will laugh at situations that others may not find funny. And I will tell you that my sense of humor has gotten me through some of the toughest things that anyone could ever face. Let that sink in. Sense of humor can get you through things that no one else ever should have to face. I'm not saying sarcasm. I'm not saying, ugly humor or anything like that. It's having a sense of humor, allowing yourself to laugh, not always calling out people when you disagree with them. Maybe you just laugh about it. Okay. So a sense of humor. And then empathy and self-care. So empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is not necessarily taking on everything that someone else is feeling. Empathy is being able to understand and feel with someone. It doesn't mean that you take it all on. And self-care can be a lot of different things. Self-care can be a walk at lunch in the sunshine. It can be getting enough sleep. It can be fueling your body with the right nutrition. It can be taking a nap. It can be reading a book. It can be a date night with your significant other. It could be playing in the backyard with your kids. It could be cuddling with your dog. It could be a cup of tea. It could be a cup of coffee. It could be all sorts of things. It could be making sure that you get your annual physical. So self-care looks different in different situations. And it's crucial in keeping up your level of resiliency and adaptability. All right. So those are just some of the ways. And when you're looking at team resiliency, If you're working with a team, whether it's your team or within an organization, then connection is huge. You guys, I talked about that I didn't really realize how important connection was. And part of that was because I moved over 60 times growing up. So I knew that I didn't have to connect with anybody. I didn't really get to know people. I got involved at school. I was a straight A student. I took part in different activities. Told you that I've always been, athletic. I've always played a lot of sports. I've always done a lot of things like that. But as far as connecting with individuals, I didn't do it because I felt like if I built those connections, I would just hurt because I knew that I was going to have to move again. The funny thing about that is I hurt anyway because I didn't build those connections. So connection is huge. Connection and then communication. And what meaning are you giving? What meaning is the team giving to the current situation? And how can you bring in acceptance without everyone laying down and just taking it? How can you help the team build acceptance? How can you help the team build connection? How can you help the team create positive meaning? How can you notice what you can control versus what you can't control? And then what do you put in place for each of those? Okay. So team resiliency looks a little different than personal resiliency, the things that you might do. And yet there's a lot of overlap. Okay. And then when you are looking at, there's also proactive optimism, well-being, and using humor in the team environment too. And using humor in a team environment may also be fun activities. Are there things that you can do outside of work or maybe inside work that helps build the team connection? Those fun activities using a sense of humor can help build the morality and connectivity of the team members, whether it's a family team, a company team, your whole business team, whatever that looks like. All right. And then lastly, the elements. I want to talk about the elements of well-being, because well-being is one of the things, both team and self-care, right? The self-care when you're looking at from an individual standpoint. So have you ever done a wheel of life? Any of you have ever done a wheel of life, scored yourself on a wheel of life? It's something that I walk clients through frequently and have them score themselves. And there's usually 5 to 10 elements to a wheel of life. And these same elements show up in well-being in a work environment. So how would you score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 with your physical well-being? How would you score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 with your career, whether you are self-employed or working for someone else? How is your career well-being? 1 to 10. 1 being low, 10 being great. Okay. What about on your social well-being? What does your social well-being look like? 1 to 10. What is your spiritual well-being? Whether you are God or whatever it is that you lean into, what is your spiritual well-being? 1 to 10. Okay. What is your financial well-being? Oof. In this environment these days, lots of people don't want to talk about that. And yet it's super important to know. Okay. It is super important to know where you are with your financial well-being. All of these are super important to know. And it's the financial well-being is one of the ones that we stick our heads in the sand the most. It's time you gave yourself a score on your financial well-being and mapped out a plan to improve whatever gap it is between your number and a 10. Okay. What is your financial well-being? What is your community well-being? Do you have a community around you? I'm not talking about just the community at large. Who is your community? Who do you have that you can go to? Do you have a coach? Do you have a confidant? Do you have some business besties or something like that you can call up and say, holy cow, it has been the worst week. It has been the worst launch. It has been XYZ. Hey, I need to bounce some ideas off of you. Who do you have in your community that can support you when things aren't at their best and who can celebrate you when they are? Who's in that community for you? All right. And then lastly, your emotional well being. How are you emotionally? 1 to 10. Where are you the vast majority of the time? Are you upbeat and optimistic? Or are you just kind of flatlining? Or are you somewhere down here and really needing something to hold you accountable? Do you need someone or something to hold you accountable? Okay. So we've covered a lot today. We've been on a lot longer than I normally am for these pop-ups. But like I said, it's a lot to cover. And I want to remind you a couple of things. One, if you haven't yet signed up for the emails, make sure that you do, because I'm doing wrap up on this series. And there's some bonuses that you're going to get as we finish up next week on this pop-up series. So I want to make sure that you have access to all of that. And again, if you'd love to do a consultation call, put it in the comments. Just say consult or call, right? If you don't want to have to spell consult, if you just want to write the word call, you can do that. Or you can send a DM on whatever platform it is that you are watching this live broadcast today, or on any of the other series. If you want to look at day 1 through 3, those are still up and viewable. So take a look, send a DM, put it in the comments, say call, and we will send you a link to get scheduled for a 30-minute call with me that just will help you decide, okay, what are the goals I want to go after? What do I need in order to do that? What's the best next step for me? Promise, it's not a sales call. If we both decide that there's something we want to talk about, great. And if we don't, that's fine too. It's not for everybody, right? But the consult call is. So make sure you book one of those. All right, you guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Those of you who have been here the whole time today, this one went a little bit longer. And I want to thank you. For those of you who are watching the replay, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you all tomorrow, same time, same channel. And we will be heading into an additional power skill and how it impacts you in today's environment. All right. Thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you then.